everyone! If we haven't met before, my name's Katrina Walser from Oliphant and I'm a knitting designer and teacher based in Sydney, Australia. Today I have the newest edition of my ongoing Great Aussie Yarn review series where I review yarns that are available for purchase in Australia. We're going to be talking today about Bendigo Woollen Mills cotton. So if you haven't seen one of these videos before, the reason that I'm making them is that living in Australia can be a little frustrating for knitters. Because most of the designers and people who make knitting content on the internet actually live overseas, mostly in America, they use a lot of yarn that you can't easily get here. While you can ship internationally, it's not always the cheapest thing to do, or these days especially, the most reliable. So I started a project a little while ago to write as many of my patterns as I could using locally available yarn, and I decided to make these videos to introduce you all to some local yarn that you might not know and talk about local substitutes for some of the more popular yarns that people talk about from overseas. So as I mentioned earlier, today we're talking about cotton. I really love using cotton. It gets a bit of a bad rap sometimes because it behaves quite differently to how wool does, and I think people aren't expecting that. But it's machine washable and it's hypoallergenic, so it's perfect for baby knits, which is actually why I started using it. And once I'd gotten the hang of it, I just kept going because I really like how it works out, and I like that it was great for summer knits. While I was living in the US, the brands I used most were the cotton from We Are Knitters and Dishie from Knit Picks, which are both 10-ply cottons or worsted weight. Now, I wish I had some of either of the yarns to show you, but I don't. But it's pretty easy to see what they look like online. So when I moved back home to Australia and I was looking for a local substitute for both of these yarns, I was very happy to come across Bendigo Woollen Mills cotton. So this is the Bendigo Woollen Mills cotton. It comes in 4, 8 and 10 ply weights. And because I was mostly looking for a substitute for the WAG cotton and for Dishie, I've only used the 10 ply so far. So here it is. These are two of the colours. This is light teal and parchment. So in all the different weights, the yarn comes in these giant 200 gram balls. And for the 10 ply, it has 360 meters in it. So I'm guessing for the 4 and the 8 ply, it would have even more yarn in the ball. They're only $15 a ball. So for the size and the meterage, it's really, really good value for money. Aside from the price, there are two main things that I love about this cotton. First off, it comes in a really big range of these beautiful colours. And they update the colours every year. So this is the 2022 range. So they're really bright and saturated, and there are lots of pastels as well as some sort of brighter jewel tones that I really like. They also give this colour card out for free, so you can see what you're getting before you order. Secondly, I find that this yarn holds texture really well. So this is my 4-way stop baby blanket that I'm working on at the moment. If you look here in the border of the blanket, that's seed stitch. And I just really love how the stitch definitions come out. I had some issues with the WAC cotton when I was using it, with it holding texture properly. It just felt quite slippery. And so I really, really love the stitch definition on this. The flip side of that though, is that when you first pick the ball up, it's maybe not exactly as smooth as you'd expect. So it's very soft and squishy and it feels lovely, but the individual strands, they don't feel rough, they just feel sort of textured. So I have some guesses as to why that is. First off, this is 100% cotton, but it's not Pima cotton. So there are different, I think they call them grades of cotton, and the softest and the smoothest is called Pima cotton, and this is just regular old cotton. So if you're coming from a yarn like the We Are Knitters cotton, which is Pima cotton, and you start using just a regular cotton, it can feel a little rougher. But it's not rough at all, it's just less sort of slippery than you'd expect. I also think that it might be because the individual strands or plies that this yarn is made up of aren't twisted super tightly around each other. It's a little bit of a looser twist. So when you're touching it, I think some of the texture that you're feeling is the individual strands because if it was twisted tighter around itself, it would feel a lot smoother as one long strand. The other thing to watch out for this yarn is that it feels a little bit thinner than a lot of 10-ply yarns that I'm used to using. So I would recommend, especially if you're substituting it in for a different 10-ply yarn, that you do a swatch before you start any projects, just to make sure that your tension in your gauge is correct. And speaking of substitution, I will say, this isn't anything to do with this cotton in particular, just cotton in general. If you aren't used to working with cotton, I'd stick to patterns to begin with that are written for cotton yarn. Like I mentioned earlier, cotton behaves quite differently to wool. I don't really want to go into all of the details about how and why, but just know that your final item is going to behave very differently in a cotton than it would if you knit it in a wool. So until you have a better sense of what those differences are and how to compensate for them, if you do want to knit with cotton, I would recommend sticking with patterns that are written for cotton. So all that being said, I figured I'd show you a few patterns that are written for cotton that you can use this for. So my most popular pattern ever is a 10-ply cotton top. It's called Lorraine's Lace, and it's actually what I'm wearing now. It was originally written for Knit Picks Dishie, and I've been wanting to try and see what it would be like in the BWM cotton. By sheer coincidence, my friend Alexandra, who's Basic Stitches over on Instagram, actually cast on a Lorraine's Lace top in the BWM cotton a little while ago, like 2 or 3 days ago. And so I'm really excited to see how that turns out. And I will link to both the pattern and Alexandra's Instagram down below in the description box, so you can follow along and see how it turns out with me. The other patterns that I have that use cotton are baby blankets. So like I said, I started using cotton for baby knits because it's a really good material to use for babies. And so I've just made a lot of cotton baby blankets. So the first pattern that I have is called the Building Blocks Blanket. And I made this version in this picture here for my niece at the beginning of last year, which is why I don't have the blanket, because it lives at her house. It's a pattern of mine, and it was originally written for the We Are Knitters cotton, but I rewrote it into using Bendigo Woollen Mills cotton when I moved back to Australia. It lives on their website now, and I will post a link to that below. It is a mosaic knitting pattern, so it's a fun one to get into mosaic knitting if that's something you want to try. The other baby blanket pattern that I'm working on right now is the 4-way stop, which is this that I showed you earlier. It was also originally written for the We Are Knitters yarn. I think I published this back in 2017, but I'm making some tweaks to it and updating the yarn right now. It's in test at the moment. So I don't have a finished sample to show you, but I did make some mini versions to test some things out with the pattern. So this is what it looks like. This one I only did in 2 colours. I use it as a dishcloth now for my daughter because she can be a bit of a mess after she finishes eating. I will say this has held up really well. We use this almost every day to wipe up a grubby toddler, and it gets wet, obviously, because we use it on her and then rinse it out and hang it up to dry. So it has gotten a little bit stiff just from use, I think. But every time you wet it, it comes out perfectly soft. And whenever it comes out of the washing machine, it feels great. So yeah, the colours, seriously, I wiped up bolognese with this and it's still white. So can't really complain. So this is a mini version of what the 4-way stop blanket will look like, except the final thing will be in 4 colours. So each of these triangles will be 2. And if you are interested in the pattern itself, the best place to keep an eye out for it is in my newsletter. So sign up below and I will send you all of the details on the release and some discount codes and stuff, but it'll be out on the 28th of March. So that's everything I've got for you about the Bendigo Woollen Mills cotton. I didn't want to go into cotton in general because I'm saving that for another video. But for this particular cotton, I really do love it and I use it all the time. I've had so much of this stuff in my stash and I'm looking forward to trying it in some of the other weights as well. I'd love to know what you think. Drop me a comment below because I'd love to know what you've made or what you'd be excited to cast on. And if you liked this video, please make sure to hit the like button because it really does help other people to find me. And if you're new here and want to see more videos like this, there is a playlist of all of my previous Great Aussie Yarn reviews right here. And you can subscribe to me with this button here or the little subscribe button down below to make sure that you don't miss out on any of my other videos. So I will see you soon, but until then, happy knitting!